Welcome back. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch and is ready for the afternoon session. We kick off with Martin Sykes, who's going to present on one page, one bust. So Martin.
Thank you. Hope you all enjoyed the lunch. Good spread. I was told a while ago you only have to be better than the previous presenter. And then you have lunch, you think, I hope it's not going to be a great lunch. Those cakes weren't bad, so I know I'm going to have to push it now. Both to make sure I beat the quality of the lunch, but also to keep you awake. So don't be surprised if I try and put a little bit of energy into this. I know what it can be like in that post-lunchtime snooze opportunity you have. I will try very hard to ensure I see no eyelids dipping in this particular audience while I find my way through. But if you've got any questions, please do put your hand up along the way if I'm making statements you don't agree with or things you'd like further clarification on. I will try and squeeze that into my time. And if you see me getting to within seconds of the final time and there are people waving their arms frantically at the front, I will do my best to not ignore them and get on with it. One page or bust? Why? Why one page or bust? Well, for nearly 20 years now, I've been teaching people how to actually do a better presentation with your information. Why that long? Because that's just a little bit after I got my backside handed to me when I was trying to present some really good data and information we put together in an organisation, and it failed. And I had to really start learning how to do this job better. Everything you're going to see today is learnable, is teachable to other people. Because you look back at who I was 20 years ago, I would not get up in front of an audience to do anything like this. And all the things I'm going to take you through have come from great people over the years. In some cases going back nearly 2,500 years, in some cases just a few. But it's all material that you can take on board and do something about. But I get back to why on one page. Well, what's the attention span of your typical audience these days?
5 seconds if you're lucky.
About that. 5 seconds if you're lucky. And a senior audience as well are going to be on their phone as soon as you have started. Yeah? It happens all the time. Does it matter? Well, probably not. They've got important things to do. But if you want that audience to remember what you're telling them, you've got to try and get that message across crisply and cleanly and in a way they can understand. Which is why I say, work out how to get it on one page. You may then end up with 50 slides to talk about in 45 minutes. Not a problem. But when you get to the end, did you actually get that story on one page so you can hand it over? Because how many times do you get people asking you for your slide deck afterwards? You still get a few of those, don't you? Do they actually want your slide deck for the purpose of representing it anyway? Are they going to reread those materials? Perhaps they've seen a bit of clip art they really want. Yeah? When I was first taught how to do presentations, they told me this thing called a handout. It's gone out of fashion, I know, because right back then when I was taught how to do materials, we had these overhead projectors and pieces of plastic you wrote on with pens, and that was how you put a presentation together. If you were in a really fancy company, you could print onto the plastic and pop it on the overhead projector. We didn't have the PowerPoint and all those sorts of tools. So they told you, have a handout. Get your story straight on just a page that you can give out. Why? Because if you want a way for your audience to remember what it is you're telling them so they can use it, you need to give them something that is consumable after the fact as well. So let's dive into this presentation. You've got tons of data. I'm sure you love your data. I'm sure you love that fancy graphic you've put together with all its nice little curves on there. And you've followed all Tufty's rules, or you've done a canvas type view on it, and it's beautiful. Sorry, nobody cares. Until you start to work out why they're going to care about that content. Until you really get the focus on understanding what is it they care about. Because when you're standing up talking to an audience and you're telling them, this is what I care about, that's great. You might feel good about it. They're going to be back on their phone because it's not something they care about. When you can think from their perspective and you work out what is the question they need answering, and you can be the servant to that person and answer that question, then you've got a real chance you will fill every seat in the auditorium with people wanting to understand what it is you have to say. But knowing what you have to say is only part of it. It's doing it the right way. How many people read the book Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath? Pity. But good for me as well, because that means you don't know what is on page 242. Chip works sometimes at this very prestigious university, and part of his course, he gives a whole set of MBA students some data and asks them to present that data to their colleagues. That's it, that's the exercise. Here's lots of data. What do? They present it to their colleagues. And at the end of that presentation, he plays a little comedy video, sometimes a bit of Monty Python, and he asks them, after that, write down everything you can remember from the presentations. Good test here, because if you can't remember the content after just one little comedy video, you can't do anything with that content. You can't make a decision, you can't support that decision later on. If one bit of Monty Python is good, but if one bit of Monty Python can break that, what hope do you have when your audience is trying to check emails and important things in your meeting as well, when they're distracted by 1,000,001 other things in your organisation? So let's look at this audience of MBAs at Stanford. These are supposed to be the best of the best. They're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for this opportunity to learn to be the best in the world, being taught by the best in the world. These people should be pretty damn good at telling you about data, shouldn't they? Yeah? So how many of them tell a story, do you think, and how many just present the data? Any ideas about how many would tell a story?
Zero.
Zero. Not quite. Not quite. 10% tell a story. It's about that sort of level. The other 90% don't. They present the data. So let's compare 90% data set with 10% data set. Of the 90% data set, that's this side of the room, what do you reckon your retention rate is in your audience after they've watched a bit of Monty Python? Sorry? A few percent. 5? 0? You already know where I'm going with this, don't you? In other audiences, some of them come out straight up and go 30, 40, 50, you know, I've done an MBA, I can do this stuff. Okay, this side of the room, they've done a story. What's your retention level?
It's higher than those.
You think it's higher than they are?
I would say.
Bit? A lot? Just way out the park, different?
About half higher.
10% tell a story, and they get a 63% retention level. Just think about that for a minute. It's exactly the same data to exactly the same audience, with people at random deciding they're going to tell a story. The only thing that differed was they put a narrative structure around it. Why does that work? Well, neuroscience over the last decade has been showing exactly why that works. What you've got up here is a story processing engine. And if you can tie your content to narratives and stories that people already understand and can relate to, your content will associate with those memories as well. And at that point, you get stickiness. And when people can hold information, they can do something with it. When they can listen to a story, it's much better that they can actually retell that story as well. And stories are things we can retell. Sure, we can't always get the punchline the right way around in a joke. But a story, typically, if you hear it, they'll somehow tell you today, you'll be able to retell that story. And with that, you may not get the number exactly right, but it's probably close enough. You'll be in the same sort of shaped box to say, well, it's this compared to this. I know that the numbers can change. For years I was telling everybody this was 65%, and I went back and read the paragraph and go, oh, I've been getting that one wrong. But it was close enough. So we want to get it stuck up there. Now, if I go all the way back to Cicero, so I'm not quite 2,500 years now, I think I'm 1st, 2nd century, something like that. Cicero said this: my Latin is not good enough to get the pronunciation exactly correct for it, but who can guess what it is he said?
What? How? When?
Yeah! The words that are used when we teach journalists straight out, how do you tell a story? How do you actually collect the facts together and pass them on? These are the key things you need to understand. It's the stuff that you would all be working with when you put your data together, but it's how you put it together and tell the story. And if you think about it, what you're putting together, who? The characters, the point of view, the narrative structure, the actions and the themes that are within it. That might also take us into whether it's in the past, the present or the future. Some of the stories we might tell have an event that happened just yesterday and are now looking a long way out to what's going to happen because of it. Others may have been going on for a couple of centuries with climate change, and we are now at a crux point in that story for the way things are going to go forward. But it's still a story. You just need to know where you are in it, and these sorts of questions to be asking about it. What I find very often, though, is people haven't done the hard work of work out what these individual things are and how they fit together. When you spend just half an hour doing that with your content, you start to get to the point of working out what's important to put in the story and what you can leave out. Because a story that takes an hour to give it is probably also going to be one that people forget. But you need to filter it down to the key messages, the key parts that will stick with the audience as well. So here's an example. One of the worst things you can do is give them too much information. I'm not saying it's only 25 points on a slide or something like that, but let me tell you this little story. Back in the days when I worked for Microsoft, I was in part of the consulting team, and I was teaching people how to do better presentations there as well as a side job. And I got a call from an account team to say they just sold everything, the full license stack to one of the biggest clients out there. There were 3 senior folks in the customer side who were going to be the targets of a follow-on presentation that would tell them this is what you bought and why it's good. And the poor young lady on the account team who had been tasked with putting this presentation together was panicking, because they didn't have very long to do the presentation, about an hour in total, and she was already on about 130 slides, because her instructions were, go and get the standard deck that has the content for each of the main things they purchased, and put them together, and put some structure around it so we can deliver it. Basically, it was a lot of data. So when we'd finished, and I carved it all back for her, how many slides do you think we ended up with for these 3 key decision makers? 10? Any more? 3. You're close. The answer is 5. Hello with Microsoft, thank you, any questions, and 3 in the middle. 1 for each stakeholder who had a significant problem that justified why they had spent the money. The only thing they really needed to understand was how their particular problem they cared about was going to be solved by what they'd invested in. And with that, they would then actually go forward in the organisation and champion the use of that technology stack for that purpose. So we carefully crafted those 3 slides to fit that audience. The account team reviewed it all, were horrified because it wasn't what they were used to. So they delivered about 180 slides to the client. But they had been convinced they should start with these core 3, and that's as far as they got before the client stood up and said, that is spot on. And all the rest was sitting in the end of the deck for their just-in-case moment. You know, they couldn't quite bring themselves to not do it. It did mean they couldn't transfer the deck in any medium whatsoever. Like they had to be able to hand it over to the client, except for taking the USB stick with them and passing it over. But what's key there is filtering and getting to what does your audience really care for? And get rid of the rest. You probably don't need it. Now, story. I've mentioned a few times, what is a story and what comes into a story to put it all together? There are a few key things we need to be thinking about. The purpose of the story, the structure for it, characters. Stories have characters, people or things in them. And content itself. Stuff happens in the story. We've got to bring all that together in a perspective that is relevant to our particular audience. And that's the key bit, bringing it together relevant to the audience. Sometimes when you've got a great piece of data or a visual, and you craft that wonderful presentation to go with it, it is for one use only, the presentation you give it to at that point. Don't assume it's the right way of delivering it to the very next presentation. Always take a step back and work out who is my audience, and do I need to change the way in which I'm going to deliver this information and how I'm going to deliver it for them. That test is very important. The content you're seeing here, I've been delivering in one way or another for nearly a decade now to audiences all around the world in conferences and workshops. It is never the same deck twice. I'd get bored doing that anyway, but I also try and think, how am I going to adjust this content to fit the people I've got in the room, with the experience they've got, and also what they might have heard before. 3 slides that I was going to show to you have been deleted because they're totally irrelevant given what was told to you this morning. So already, tweak it a little bit to make sure the audience is getting the maximum value from it. So I was fortunate enough in my Microsoft career to be in the audience when this event happened. Steve, Bill and Satya were on stage in front of me. I just happened to be in Seattle delivering workshops in the building next door when we heard over the grapevine there's an announcement coming. Got in there, managed to get to the front with a couple of colleagues, and these guys have got a story to tell. And you can imagine, whatever they've gone through behind the scenes to work out the transition of power from Steve to Satya, sitting there, the CEOs of the most powerful companies on the planet, that could have taken a long time. They'd really crafted it though. It only took them 10 minutes to tell the story of how power was transitioning from Steve to Satya, what it meant to the people in the room, and how they should take that forward to the next step. And it just stuck with me as this is a really good show of thinking about a few words. Who is your audience and what do you want them to do? Because they could have done this live on TV, they could have had it at some big press conference. They picked to do the announcement internally in a building on the Microsoft campus without any external cameras there or any external news crews, but to the internal staff first and to a whole mix of teams from all across the organisation, because they wanted that news to cascade through the organisation and the way in which it would feel to them. So a phrase I use a lot with people is, who is your audience and what do you want them to do? Which concatenates to a new little word for you to add to your vocabulary, hoodoo. Remember that. Whenever you're sitting down there and you think, I'm going to do a quick presentation, hoodoo. Because if you haven't done that, you're missing the very important first step of putting together your content to have an impact. Back to plot structures and stories. So this is 2,500 years ago. Aristotle laid out what the core structure of a story is. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 on the bottom sitting down there. You've got a setup, there's a confrontation between two parties in your story, and then there's a resolution at the end. That's fundamental story structure. Over the years it's been expanded out a little bit, and you can pretty much these days find a lot of materials talk about the 5 parts to the story and how it all fits together. But let me take you through what this story arc actually is. There's a little line on there, it's called the tension line. And it's how the tension in the story is building up as you get towards the resolution. So in every story, it starts because something happens, an inciting incident. And that inciting incident has to be in a certain context. So understanding that context, first of all, and it can be in just a matter of a few lines or setting the scene in an organisation, but you need to know where you're starting from, and then something happens, an incident, to which people respond. Usually our hero. So as our hero has responded, it is usually a reaction to the incident. And it looks like things are going well as the tension increases, and then the hero sorts it all out. That's called the false hope, because that's the point in the story when you think, oh, it's all sorted now, and it's not. That's when the real hard work starts. And that sort of cycle repeats itself over and over again in our organisations. A problem occurs, somebody steps in or is told to sort it out, it looks like they're sorting it out, and that's the point you realise it's actually going to take you 6 months to fix this because you're doing a little bit more work and it's like, ooh, it's not really going to happen. It's the first time you do the presentation to the senior team saying, this is our project plan, and you're 30 seconds into it and they start ripping it apart and telling you all the stuff you haven't thought of. And then you have the struggle. In the struggle, it is step by step as the hero faces off against one challenge and another that is increasingly demonstrating how hard it is to solve this particular problem. And at the end, a new world in some form. There is a new resolution. There are many different types of story, I'll come on to that in a minute, but do you recognise this structure? Haven't you watched CSI? I've seen CSI series. All of them are the same. You can pretty much tell to the minute where you are in the story cycle. How many watched the A-Team years and years ago? I know there's a few grey hairs in the room, you might remember that sort of series. 7 series, I think it was. Exactly the same in every episode. Somebody turns up at a cafe and meets Hannibal in drag, convinces him that the A-Team needs to come and help them. The A-Team turns up because the nice young lady's father is living on a farm and the town mayor is trying to push him off the farm. So the A-Team wanders in to see the town mayor and everything's going to be sorted out because you've got BA and he's big and he's bad. And that's our false hope, because that's the point when the guys with Kalashnikovs that work for the mayor come round the corner. And of course you're going to end up with a van in the barn, an oxyacetylene torch and 2 tractors and it turns into a flying tank. with suspension that is beyond belief. And there's all sorts of steps till you get to that final point where there's a little gunfight. Now this was back in the 80s, so nobody dies. They shoot a lot and fall over, but nobody actually dies. Somebody has to run after the bad guy, ties him up, and just as the military police come flying in, the A-team's disappeared. Over and over again we had that same story. And people loved it. Why? Because you love stories that follow a structure and a pattern that you recognise, as well as having characters that you can relate to in that story. Now these days the A-team probably wouldn't pass muster, because as we see more and more media and variations, we expect more and more from it. But you look at any TV show that you like watching regularly, and straight out, you'll see this structure in it. Sometimes spanned over months, if you're watching a soap opera, sometimes spanned over 15 minutes. But the same structure flows over and over again. So when you're thinking about a presentation, a story, where are you in that story right now? Are you right at the start with the inciting incident? Are you at a point when you think, we've done some work, but we now know it's not going to work, so we've got to explain we're at false hope? Are you all the way at the top, and you're just about to take out that final delivery on all the bits and pieces that are going to go right? SAP goes live tomorrow. Please, God, make it work. Yeah? Oh, false hope, yes. So if that's our story structure, there are many different types of story you can apply to it. The Greeks and some key authors out there say there's only one true story structure, that is it. But in reality, there are many ways in which you can almost colour it in and apply different themes to it. You can have the meandering story that feels like there's all sorts of different side roads in there before it gets to the end. You can have the story that just goes bang and you're straight into it. You can have the Game of Thrones, or Lost, if anybody remembers that as a TV series that really meandered all over the place and got lost itself in its own structure, one nesting after another. You can have it in different genres. I know I put sci-fi, detective, action up there. There are some that don't work for business presentations. But you know what? A detective story does. We have this problem. We have this issue in the organisation, and this is the work that's been done to analyse that issue, to find out where the culprit really is in the organisation. Presentation earlier today, perhaps with the NHS and thinking about that, many issues that go wrong when you're looking at process control. What was the root cause? That can be given as a detective story. That would actually get the audience a little more engaged with. Well, the classic story styles down here, worked out by a guy called Stephen Booker in a book that is nearly 2 inches thick, as he illustrates every example he has ever found in literature of each of these, talks about some of those common structures behind the scenes within stories. One, the voyage and return. You start in a location, you travel to another location on a voyage, and then you come home again, and you bring what you've learnt with you. Taking a step further, that voyage becomes a quest. There is something you are searching for in your organisation to try and find that nugget that actually tells you that's where we want to go for our next market opportunity. Some of these are less useful. Rags to Riches is the Eddie Murphy style story where he is the down and out, and you have the big city tycoon, and they sort of swap places while they bring Eddie Murphy up and then they drop him back down again. So you've gone from rags to riches, you lose it, and then you claw your way back again. Up and down that little cycle. That's happened to so many companies that you can actually talk about a company history of being great, falling on hard times, and we're going to go back to riches. And this is where we're going with it. And I've seen that used many times by senior executives in organisations. Comedy, less useful. This is the Shakespearean style of comedy he references here, which is much more about the distraction and that sort of, okay, I've got two characters that now look the same, which one is what? And then you fall into some sort of strange situation where you're following the wrong one in that style of comedy. And tragedy. I try to avoid tragedy stories. A tragedy is about a spiral of descent, slowly heading into hell in this. And yes, there have been companies that have gone down that route, but it's not a great one to inspire your audience in presentation terms. But here's where this is all important while spending time talking about it. Have you thought about what your story structure is and which style when you stand up and you talk to your audience? Or are you going to do a hodgepodge of bits and pieces in there? Because when you do that, you fail to tell a story. Your audience is going to start getting confused. Hang on, I thought it was on some sort of hero cycle here. They don't know that. Their brains aren't working at that level, analysing the metadata behind the scenes of your story, but it just doesn't feel right. If you can make it feel right, if you can make it hit one of the good story styles, they just go along with it smoothly. And facts and information and even direction you're giving them flows into the brain and passes all those normal cognitive filters that people put in place. And there's plenty of evidence behind the scenes to show that using a story can help get your message across. There's a great industry built up all around this. Can anybody tell me the industry?
TED Talks.
Sorry?
TED Talks.
TED Talks, yes. Marketing. This is what marketing's all about. Tell you a story to put you into the right context, and you go, that's where I want to be, because you start to now align yourself with that story. And not just with the story, with the characters. So, here's two characters, very similar. Both lost their parents, both went through hard time as children, which was formative experience for them. Both wear black masks and have black capes. Both fight for a cause. Massive similarity. A little bit different in their style of operation, sitting out there. But by just putting the one image up, straight away your head is almost exploding with what you know about that character. There is so much context you already have about it. If you can characterize the things you want to change in your organization or your data in such a way that just using one word or one symbol can have that sort of a hook on your audience, you can have a massive effect fairly quickly. Now, when I talk about character, people say, yeah, but I've not got a Batman in the organisation, and what we've got to change is about our organisational culture, and all my data is showing that people are leaving sooner after starting. Our retention period is dropping in the organisation, so how do we retain staff? That's the data that you want to look at. Well, where's your character in that? Perhaps your negative character, your villain in all of this, is your company culture. And there is something you can do to characterise that culture or give a name to it in such a way that everybody goes, yeah, that's everything that's wrong with this organisation that we've got to change. So thinking about how you visualise a character, how you describe a character is a really important part of putting a story together. And probably also comes from the data sets you've got. How can you characterise it and label up what you want to take from that data? So I mentioned villain. Villains are opposed by heroes. Heroes and villains. I prefer the hero and villain phrases rather than protagonist and antagonist. Protagonist and antagonist makes it sound almost academic. Hero and villain, there's a bit of emotion in there. And emotion's okay. You know, we want the hero to win. We don't want the villain to win. But the villain is just somebody who opposes the hero, who has a different outcome in mind around the subject of the story, in this sense. And this is where I say to people, just because it might be your finance approvals process that gets in the way if you ever getting a project done, does not make the CFO the villain in your organisation. And it would be a really bad idea to label them on your slides as CFO villain. You need to sort this one out. But they have a reason for that conflict. If you're going to tell a story, usually there is a conflict in the story. That was where Aristotle started us out in that central section a few slides ago. What is the conflict that your data is representing? What is the choice that people need to make that you are trying to present to them? And then there are all sorts of other supporters and influencers. If I take a look at this in a little more of what's out there around it, there's lots of analysis that's being done on the core characters you find in every story. You go from Lord of the Rings to Star Wars to Marvel superheroes, and you start analysing the characters in them, your favourite TV show or an event happening in your organisation, you will very quickly start to find many of these different roles. They've been around over 7,000 years, according to the analysis, because the analysis was done on fairy tales. All the way back, how did fairy tale structures go, and then forward from the late 1900s to today to see the fit. That analysis says that every hero is supported by helpers, somebody who sets them on the way, and people who give them things to work. You can consider those within your story structure, but you can still tell a good story that just has a hero and a villain into it. You'll often find a lot of these other roles in there. A princess is an embodiment of the story goal. That's an interesting point, this one, because they don't necessarily need to be princesses, and you're not going to drag the princess onto stage at the side of you in the corporate presentation. But how are you going to embody the goal that you want to get to in a way that makes it tangible and easy to recognise for your audience? Say, that's what we want. That's what we're in conflict over. Remember this phrase. If you're standing up in front of an audience and you're trying to tell them this is what to do and how you're going to do it, You are not the hero. The reason you are telling them a story is for them to engage with the story, to believe that they could be the hero. Why? Well, let me try it on you. I've just told you how to do all this, and no matter what your presentations you want to do, you can call on me and I'll come and do it. I'll be your hero. Does that make life a lot easier for you? Does that mean you need to do much? You'll have to talk to me. Do you need to commit to anything? I'll sort it for you, no problem. Do you think it's going to get very far? Probably not. But if I can tell the story to you and you can read into it, oh, that's me. I want to be the one that's making that change. Then I'm starting to have the right sort of impact. I'm engaging you to be the hero in the story, to take a part in it. And usually in the stories I'm helping people put together, that is a core part of the message, that the people in the audience are the ones who need to actually take action, not the person standing up on stage. Whether that be as a climate change presentation, go back and watch the videos of Al Gore from a few years ago. Nancy Duart, a fantastic lady who puts together a lot of materials on presentation skills, really helped him put together to engage his audience, to be the hero and to take action. That's what we're talking about here. You're not talking that Al Gore's going to go out and try and refreeze the North Pole or pick all the plastic up. He needs to engage people to go and sort it out in those presentations he was doing. But now back to what you've got all this data. It's not just about a story, it's a story and the visual that goes with it. Because when we put the two together, we have a much bigger impact. So 63% greater retention level when we tell a story. If you can get the visualization of your data, again, we increase the impact. So it's about pulling the two together, because when people can remember your content, they can do something about it. Here's a little example from many years ago. A guy called Al Noel, who worked with me, and he was telling me a story about back in his days, and Al's retired now, he's quite a brilliant guy for what he's done. He was in the 101st Airborne Division of the US. And he was what they call a grunt, a guy who walks places as a soldier. And he was being told, we're getting into helicopters. This was not quite as modern as this picture now depicts. It was actually the Vietnam War that they were looking at. And for the best part of 30 minutes, a general is standing up in front of all these grunts telling them, this is how the division's going to change. We are going to be an airborne division from now on. And they're saying, no, we are not flyboys. We're not doing this. It's not working for me. No matter what data was presented about why it's right, it wasn't going to work. And you could say, if looks could kill, these guys can get pretty close to killing you with their looks. It wasn't going on. I'll say it all flipped like that in a matter of seconds. When the next slide came up with a picture of the helicopter flying over the jungle, and the next guy said, your job is not to get through the jungle. Your job is get here to defend the hill. That's when you do what you do. Okay, get it. Helicopter means to an end. I'm the guy that's at the end. Job sorted. I said, it really was as fast as that for the room to flip. One visual that just reminded them, your job is not to go through this. It's not to trudge through the jungle, to take all those chances in it, to take all the time to get there. Your time is to be spent at the end. The helicopter gets you there. You don't have to learn how to fly this thing. You don't have to do anything on it. It's transport. Mine's changed. One simple visual put at the start could have done that whole presentation in 30 seconds. Getting it right makes a big difference with that. There's another story. And this is another one that's got lots of trudging in the middle of it. I just wish the whole middle section didn't happen, because I spent a lot of time reading that to the kid, trudging through Mordor to get to the end. And there's a quick aside in this as well. Somewhere along the way, Gandalf calls for the eagles to fly them all out. Do you remember that bit? Who's read the book? Yeah. Why the heck did we not get the eagles 300 pages earlier to just take us to the end? You know? That would have saved a heck of a lot of time and effort along the way. But what's important here is the map. If you're going to think about visualization, we were told this morning, maps are hard to work with. They are, if you use real maps. But you can make a map on a page that lays out your data, the whole structure of the story you want to tell, and how you're going to navigate it. You know this diagram, I'm guessing, being data people. Is there anybody here who doesn't recognise this diagram? No. Good, it's pretty famous, isn't it? Do you know the story behind it? Can you tell that story? Stick your hands up if you can tell me the story.
The story how we got green.
No, not necessarily what the diagram's representing. Yeah? Napoleon's ill-fated march, all the way to Russia and back through the Russian winter. There's 6 dimensions of data sitting on here. On one diagram, you've got something that you could use as a map. Let's lay that down. If that's my map or mental model, I want to tell a story which is about traversing between locations and events. And that story starts me out here in Kono, Lithuania, and takes me to Russian winter as supplies get low. And then there's a decisive battle, but the failure in Moscow when the Russians just retreat and burn the city. And then they have to go all the way back and lose most of the forces that are returning home, crossing the river in a flood. In one diagram, I can tell a story here, a story of many parts that has many sub-stories in it. I could do with this. This is one from quite a few years ago when I was working on a project called Building Schools for the Future. And we created a school with all its standard features in it and described that in detail as part of the materials. Everybody understood what that school was about. You can now tell stories about the school, whether that be the school day and how the children are actually coming into the school and what happens to them. So we can put that way. Or we can put a story together here that's got, again, half a dozen different dimensions of data, from the objectives of the programme to the benefits that are going to be realised to the changes in each part of the school, laid over the part of the school where the change is going to happen, through to the programmes of work that are going to be implementing those changes into the school. And the little map helped lay that out. And your first look says there's a lot on there. Yes, there is. But a map helps people navigate that content, so on one page they can get their head around it and follow it around and see where things fit together. Brief diversion. Edward Tufte. So, he is a rock star, I would say. I was fortunate enough some years ago to be in an audience and see him present, about 1,400 of us sitting in there, and he's got some great content. And he says things like, graphical excellence consists in complex ideas communicated with precision. So, totally agree. Make sure every dot you put on a page is worth having. Yes. And he's got 6 principles that you'll find in the books. I'm going to quickly run through some of these. The integration of evidence. As I've just shown there, I can put lots of evidence together on one page, but it has to fit together. I don't want that evidence to be in lots of separate parts. If I'm going to tell a good story, I've got to actually show my audience how the parts fit together and how they make sense. Multivariate analysis. I need to show how one variable or change affects another and how they're happening over time, so my audience can spend time understanding it. But if I just show that, you don't know what happened. I've got to tell you the story as well that goes with it for that data to make sense, and where the variables come together, including the line at the bottom for the actual temperature in the Russian winter. Causality. Here's one that I've used over a number of years, where what you've got on the top, business capabilities, coloured to show which parts of the business are currently working well and which are not, with a timeline on the bottom of a programme of work that has multiple projects which are showing up on there. The blue bars underneath is the cost each month for that project as it runs. The green on the top, the benefits being realised, and there's a little line showing you the total value at the project point. Where it's being shown now, it's in the red. But as the variables will go here, there is one version of that picture. It's a PowerPoint deck. One slide for every month that goes all the way to the end. You can zoom backwards and forwards in the deck and actually see how over time the business capabilities will be changed according to the projects that are being delivered and how the cost will change while doing it. And people then start to ask questions. Now, we did this before you had these nice time series bits of software you can use to put things together. But what it was showing here was how to bring those different variables together. And doing that to then demonstrate causality as well, that as one project after another is delivered, things will change in other parts of the organisation. Whether it be showing how the dominoes will fall by making one small change all the way through to the end, or this one data set listing onto another. Key thing to think about, what is the causality in your story? Comparisons. Here's a huge A0 poster that we created in Cambridge Assessment when I worked there, to try and explain what the visitor experience would be into the new purpose-built building the organisation was moving into. And the little sticky notes that go all the way along here, these different coloured ones here, tell the difference between how it is today and how it will be in the future. Just giving you that difference on the way. Telling a story, simple visuals all the way through. This started out with sketches on post-it notes stuck on the wall, until it slowly worked its way through to the quality of presentation and really got everyone in the organisation thinking, yeah, that's what we want it to feel like. This is another work in progress. So when you're trying to put your data together, if you want to do a better presentation, get better content. Don't throw in more clip art or fancy slide animations. Start with getting better content. And here we're trying to demonstrate the whole supply chain process for the organisation, which is that racetrack in the middle, and all the different bits of data that were related to it over a year, where the issues were in it. I know we did, we printed them all out, we sprayed it with 3M sticky stuff, so made them onto post-it notes and stuck them on the wall, and then let the senior team tell their stories and move the stuff around. It took a couple of weeks, and it was messy, but at the end of it, we had all the data in the right place for them to be able to tell that story through to people of what the change would look like. So sometimes when I say get it on a page, I cheat. My page is this big. But in putting it on a page, I can step back 6 foot away from it and see the overarching structure and know the flow. And I can go right up and I can read the 6-point font that's got the data on exactly how many bits were shipped in this month and where it went. And I can take that choice of how I go in and out and engage with it while understanding the stories that are behind the scenes here. Here's another one that I did many years ago to explain how a particular engagement would run from a consulting firm into a bank. What's important is this bit down here. Who created it? Where you can get hold of it? What if I said to you 95% of all content in presentations was not fact-checked? Yeah.
You haven't checked that?
I haven't checked. Yes. But if you can demonstrate the evidence and where that evidence has been drawn from, that it has credibility behind it, that's great. And if you're prepared to put your name on something, that actually has a good psychological step to say, well, if he's prepared to put his name on it, he's probably actually checked it because he wouldn't want his reputation to be besmirched by putting something up that was shouted down as fake news later. I'm not a politician. So where's your audience when you start all of this? If everything on the grey up there is everything you know about storytelling, and the green circle is what I know, the blue circles could be what you know about it. If we're going to have a conversation about storytelling, where do I start?
Blue circle.
I start in the bit that we all know, just there. Because if I start somewhere you don't know, you're lost straight away, and you're trying to catch up with me. So if you're presenting about data in an organisation, you want to start thinking about what does my audience already know about this data or the context it's in. And if they don't know anything about it, you're on a hide into nothing, as we say up north. If they're in the red circle, what do you do? There's no overlap whatsoever with your knowledge about the situation. You don't panic. You just find something else to talk about to start with that gets them in, whether it be a metaphor about it, or you get somebody to work with them first of all to actually get them to understand what the context is before you start the presentation. You're thinking ahead, who is my audience and what do they know? Here's 2 examples from the Microsoft world of things that happened in the organisation that I can use when I talk about change to that particular audience and context. Fuel cards, they decided to remove them from all staff. Caused a bit of a fuss. Don't want to do that one again, just by an email. Microsoft Expense 2. For the biggest software company in the world, it was a really crap expenses system that they deployed and wondered, why the heck have we got this? Sausages. One morning people came into work in the Reading office and the cook had changed the sausages. It got to the UK CEO by 10:30. Sausage Gate, it was called. But straight out, I could start a session where I had nothing in common and say, you know what, change is hard? Everyone remember Sausage Gate? The audience is straight away, oh yeah, we remember that, we're not doing that one again. So you can start to get people on side with where you are and say, it's a problem statement. Here's a great lady, Alison Levine, and a map of Everest. She's climbed the tallest peak on every continent and skied to both poles. She can tell a story for 45 minutes, or she can tell it for 30 seconds about how you climb a mountain. And when I first heard this, I was in a room full of IT project managers, and they normally sat on their phones and laptops, and over the hour she was presenting, nobody did anything else but listen to her. And what she did was tell a whole series of stories, one after the other, each lasting about 5 minutes, of the journey from deciding to go on the team to Everest, an all-women's American climbing team, all the way to the top, from getting the funding, from going to Ford and Chevrolet and asking them for funding. And eventually Chevrolet said no and Ford said yes, which was great because the Chevy Avalanche didn't necessarily go well when compared with the Ford Explorer that was the branding they'd like to have going up the side of a mountain. Yeah? And she tells us, I can remember them years on. And she gave a little story that became personal to people. Yeah, I put myself in a situation. But she took from that the nugget of, and this is the lesson I learned, and moved on. So here she's telling a big story made up of many small ones. If you're going to do a presentation about your data, how do you break it down to individual parts that you can tell, this is a key part I need to tell you about, but it's in the context of the bigger story. Here's a quick example for you. Bullet points. Who does slides with bullet points? Come on, you can admit it. How many times have you seen one like this? Your data's buried in the text as well? Stop it. It's bad. Really? Stop it. Okay? I'm not looking at anybody in particular now. I just know you're out there. How would I change that? I'd do something like this. Let me tell you about Bill. Bill is an owner-operator of a truck and he's on the road 3 to 4 days a week, stopping out every night. His family don't like it. Bill's got a wife and 2 kids back home in Derby. And he is out on the roads. And you see him, and people like him every day parked up in the lay-bys in an evening. How many times can you not get into a lay-by in an evening on an A road because it's full of lorries? That's people like Bill. We need to change this. 68% of truck drivers are spending 3 nights in the cab every week, putting themselves at risk. Their families don't want them at risk. That's 28,400 parking spaces we need to make sure we provide it a year so we solve this problem. Who wants bullets to try and explain this problem? Who wants Bill's story? Yeah, that's the only data I need to show you. I've filtered it. People remember about being Bill's story for doing this. Somebody asked me a while ago, why don't you show me who Bill is? That's going too far, because this is where stories are great. Stories allow you to fill the gaps in. If you saw Bill, and Bill is not of the right ethnicity, age group, or other factors that you would support, you might turn off a little bit. But you're allowed to make Bill up to be who you want. I could have called it Bernadette instead. Or found gender neutral for it. I've always used Bill. Perhaps I've got to change that one myself. But that's a way of just thinking how to change it. And here I go completely against Tufty. I say, look, it's not chart junk. It's emotional content that gets my audience to actually engage. And that's what you need to put in to make a story work as well. To actually get the information across, you do need that side. I will fail his class with an F-. There is no doubt about that. But I totally believe in the principles he put forward about how to get good information across. If you want better answers, get better questions. I go right back to the start. If nobody cares about what you're doing, you're not going to get them engaged in what you're doing. So think about the question you are answering. Does it really mean something to your audience? Have you really engaged that senior level? Here's a little example. I'm right on time, aren't I now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to run over 2 minutes. Okay. Run for your coffees at the end, if you will. I was challenged a few years ago. Okay, you know all this storytelling stuff. Sort this out for me, will you? I want a presentation on mobile application architecture, please, that gets anybody to care about it. Because it's that structure on the right-hand side. That's what I want. Do that, and I'll buy you a pint. Okay? Let me tell you a story. Here's a nurse working in a hospital. She's got a task-focused device, as we call them. It does one thing. It measures some vital statistic of a patient. That particular device uses certain parts of this mobile architecture that have to be rock solid. She doesn't need to log into it, but it needs to connect to the network and securely transfer the data in real time to the monitoring station where it can raise an alarm. There are key things here that we need from this architecture. Now I'm rushing this a little. I'll make a few more minutes otherwise to give you the full story on it. But let me also show you the clinical staff who needs the mobile line of business solution to be able to capture patient data. Now I'm getting personally identifiable information, potentially the cause of an illness, other much more secure information, but I'm in the hospital confines. It's a device I can operate within a certain physical constraint and logged in by a clinician while they're using it. Now let me show you the director of operations, and I love this shit. I'm one of these, I am getting a shirt. But he's a mobile information worker. He's got a laptop, a desktop machine, a mobile phone. He's got access to budgets, to patient information, the works. His is the full application architecture with the full security stack here. And the responsibility he has got, should a major incident happen in that city, is to be able to bring all the resources to bear to save lives. Here's my one page. This is what I care about for each of my stories for that architecture to work, and this is why you need to understand where you sit with a particular device, or software you are working on relevant to those stories? Are you going to care a bit more now you can put it in context? Yes. I got 3 pints out of it. Now, I've drawn some nice pictures for you. Sometimes, you know, you don't need to draw very well. The meaning is more important than the aesthetics. This was one of 6 pictures I drew a while ago in my second year at Microsoft, when we were trying to push forward a change in the organisation to get Steve Ballmer to give us lots of money to grow a business on strategic consulting. We promised various things about how big the business would get to, and could deliver on that. But to get the senior VPs engaged, we drew pictures like this of what the organisation would look like, what it would do, how it would engage the customers, and stuck them on the walls of the corridors of the senior VPs, and then took over 1 or 2 of the offices around them so we could answer questions about it. And did that for a couple of weeks. So by the time they turned up to Steve, they knew the story, they could visualise it going together. Tens of millions of dollars a year for 5 years on 6 pictures on the wall. Perhaps we did a few more things with it as well. Yes, we had to write a good business case document. But this is what got people to commit and actually talk about it and where to go. So you can then take your materials and put it on a page. So when I worked out what I was going to tell you today, I sketched out what I want to tell you. How do the bits fit together? And as your one-page handout, print this one out, stick it on one side, and you can probably repeat most of what I've told you and the key points off this one page and the key themes behind the story. That's my handout. I'm not going to give you the PowerPoint deck. Well, I am. It's in the folder if you want it. But just go and get this one slide. Print it out. Lots of what I've covered are also in my book, Stories That Move Mountains, down there. If you want to get in touch, oh, and there's a one-page reminder of everything that's in the book as well. All the different storytelling techniques you can have. And you can download that from my website. You don't need to pull the photo. Get this page. So go to my website. What I spend my time doing is coaching people. I'm running workshops on storytelling and how to actually develop as a senior leader in your organisation, as well as a day job, part-time, working with a consulting company that's doing medical devices work. So if you want to find out more, just reach out. There's plenty of ways in which you can get in touch with me up there. And thank you for allowing me to run into your coffee slot.
Thank you very much, Martin. We're running a little bit over time. It's not time for a coffee break yet.
Sorry.
We've got one more presenter before we move on.